Today's show is sponsored by Do It. Cloud spend is just the surface. What really matters is how it drives performance, reliability, and speed to market. Do It Cloud Intelligence aligns every dollar to the intent of the workloads. It helps teams go beyond dashboards, surfacing hidden inefficiencies, resolving incidents faster, and aligning cloud operations with business priorities. One platform, unified signals, better outcomes across engineering and finance. Visit doit.com, that's DOIT.com, to unlock intent-aware FinOps at scale with Do It IT Cloud Intelligence.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hope everybody is doing well. Another weekend perspective. And today I want to talk about this kind of idea that we have, this sort of conundrum that we have sometimes, which is, in general, nobody wants to be told what to do, but anytime there is sort of a vacuum, or anytime there's oftentimes things that are new, people actually do want to be told what to do. At least they want to be told general directions of what to do, and they want to sort of know that the people that are, apparently in charge or leading or whatever have a clue where to go. And so we're going to kind of dive into that kind of broad topic, with a specific bent to it right after the break. Today's show is sponsored by Factor. Still verifying help desk callers with questions hackers can Google? Every security question is a vulnerability waiting to be exploited. If you're using Okta, Factor Identity Portal transforms your organization's verification process. Authenticate users with real-time MFA factors in seconds, not minutes. Slash call time 60%. Eliminate social engineering attacks and streamline help desk workflows. Check out Factor's Taco AI, the first AI agent for Okta, on their website. Your team gets one powerful dashboard for all user verification needs. Try Factor, factor.io. That's FCTR.io. Free for 60 days. Today's show is sponsored by Vasion Print. The problem with print is it's a resource suck. IT teams are spending too much time on troubleshooting and upkeep. The biggest offender? Print servers. So get rid of them. Swap your outdated, resource-intensive infrastructure for Vasion Print, formerly known as Printer Logic, and get serverless, direct IP, secure printing for any device, anywhere. Centralized print management reduces overhead and workload and increases productivity, which is great for your IT team and your bottom line. Increase security, remove scripts and GPOs, and enable self-service user deployments. Secure, seamless, and scalable. That's what you get when you eliminate print servers. See how at Vasion.com. And we're back. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, we're going to dig into this conundrum that is going on in our industry, in which, in general, and this is I think something that happens all the time in kind of human history, and happens across generations and so forth, which is, people in general don't love to be told what to do. They enjoy their personal freedoms. They enjoy the ability to dictate how their life goes, the choices that they make, how they do certain things. But at the same time, oftentimes when there is either something new or things are changing quite a bit, or there is uncertainty, they often look to some more leading thing, more higher power, whatever that might be, a leadership group, an individual, something else, to help tell them where to go. What should they do? How should they do something? And I want to dive into that today in the context of AI adoption, AI usage. And I don't want to try and relate the two things together as if there is some higher power associated with AI, but we do seem to have this conundrum going on right now, especially as AI as a technology begins to mature more and more. I guess maturity is a relative term, but it appears to be easier to get access to, easier to use. Seems to be providing kind of good answers or good outputs versus a couple of years ago, and is I keep seeing over and over again, this is quote unquote the worst generative AI will ever be in history. Maybe that'll be true, maybe it won't, but there does seem to be sort of an interesting thing, and I'm going to kind of bend this in the context of sort of enterprise AI adoption. It does feel like there is a little bit of a cliff, of a challenging point that we're at, an inflection point, if you will, between people being interested in using and adopting various generative AI tools. Again, whether it's to make you more productive, to replace a task that you do, to go off and do something that would take hours and hours that you'd like to have done in 10 minutes or whatever it might be. And people there seems to be sort of a very distinct line between those who are aggressively adopting it and those who are, I don't want to say like passively sitting on the sidelines, but actively trying not to use it, actively saying, I'm not interested in this. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to have it happen. And I think it's been interesting. I get a chance, both through this podcast, but also through my sort of day job, to talk to a lot of people, especially in the enterprise, who are somewhere in a AI journey, right? Whether these are leaders or these are individuals who are using tools and technologies, and just kind of hearing their journey, their perspective, their mindset, their way of thinking through, what are we doing, how are we doing this, and how we go about doing it. And I'm going to kind of make an argument for the importance of early AI adoption. And again, I'm not doing this in a way of what's in it for me. I'm sort of doing it from a historical perspective of just sort of watching, for the most part, every technology trend many technology trends over the last 30 plus years, right? And by no means do we get every technology trend right? We go through lots of technology trends in which, maybe we talk about something and an alternative to it got picked or wherever. OpenStack is the sort of perfect example. It never became AWS, it never became VMware, and hence it always sort of languished in this what could have been but never was. There have been plenty of technologies like aspects of VR and AR, and virtual reality and augmented reality that have had promise. We have seen large amounts of investment in there. We have seen companies like Facebook change their name from Facebook to Meta because of things like this that, again, didn't necessarily pan out, but it doesn't mean that they won't necessarily pan out in the future. They just, the timing and the technology and the pricing and the economics and all those things haven't lined up to be something that have appealed to people, right? We have seen technologies that are still ongoing, like crypto and blockchain, and things that have both interesting technical characteristics and at the same time either haven't quite figured out a killer use case, or in some cases appear to have flashing red flags that look to be lots of scams and harmful to people and stuff. So not every technology that comes along or every quote unquote paradigm change is going to be something that should be adopted. I think AI is one of those that I don't want to say universally, because that's a big word that implies a lot of things. But I think generally at a large scale, people are looking at it and they're going, there seem to be a lot of characteristics of this that in the context of being useful to, helping people's intelligence, useful to helping their productivity, helping potentially their creativity, has a lot of very interesting aspects of it. Now, does it have negative aspects to it? Sure. It seems to be incredibly power hungry in terms of how much power it uses. There seems to be ridiculous amounts of money being poured into it without necessarily having a great business model, at least for the immediate future or for an individual company. But at the same time, it does seem to have characteristics in which people are seeing very interesting outputs. And it also has this one characteristic that it's kind of feels like one of the first times, or at least one of the very few times, in which we're talking about a technology that seems to be able to touch and engage kind of anybody and everybody in that context. And what I mean by that is, if you went and talked to a CEO who is very sort of technically not super, you're not talking to like a technical founder CEO. You're talking about somebody who was like, oh, I went to Harvard Business School or whatever it would be, and you started sort of talking to them about the potential of AI. Not only have they probably played with it to some extent, but they're starting to wrap their head around like what that means. You could go to you can go to a mid-level manager and sort of dig into it a little bit, and they will have touched it and played with it and have some sense of like, okay, what could this mean for me? You could go to a brand new student right out of school, and get a sense of what that is. You probably go to my dog, and she would have two cents opinions on that. So it's an interesting technology in that sense, in that it has and does seem to feel like one of the first technologies in which we We perceive it as sort of additive to what we do, as we do many technologies. But at the same time, it has this undertone all the time of, will it also be, um, will it also sort of take away, right? And take away in the context of like, it might take away people's jobs, right? Which it, always sort of tends to be the underlying concern of the technology, amongst other things, hallucinations and power consumption and deep fakes and all that kind of stuff. But as I sort of think about this, and we watch headlines that float around of, X company laid off people, and they don't plan to backfill them because they expect AI to fill that in, or X company is not necessarily hiring new people because they are using AI to, sort through who to hire for people, or they are no longer hiring people because they think, they're going to be able to use an AI agent to replace all those things, right? Like that concern, that perception, that uh, undertone of, let's associate the technology directly to jobs, feels more impending, feels more realistic. Although we have had, and nearly every piece of technology that we talk about in the show, or that has come along over the last 40 or 50 years, has sort of been in that same vein, right? I mean, to a certain extent, like we all have a calculator in our pocket. We all have a spreadsheet in our pocket. We all have access to all the world's information in our pocket. We all have all of these things that in the past were, people's jobs, whether they were librarians or they were, going back to, the human calculators that helped figure out how to get things to NASA, or they were, accountants or whatever they might be, where they were, people that helped you check out of the grocery store. Like we have had these types of things. Shopkeepers and blacksmiths who, jobs were replaced by automobiles or whatever those things might be, right? Or, automobiles that were replaced by trains and buses and stuff, right? Like we've always had technology that to a certain extent, replaced or augmented or both, the previous set of, kind of manual tasks. And then, we figured out from there how we went along, right? Like the cloud didn't necessarily displace everybody's IT department. Did it make it more efficient? Maybe, right? Did it, open up new opportunities in ways to use technology for business? Yes, you could argue that. Okay. So all that aside, I think from, and this is a perspective from having seen a whole bunch of enterprise companies now begin to adopt this. I think there's a couple of things that kind of come to mind, right? First and foremost is, anybody who works in the technology industry, no job has ever been safe in the long run, right? So that perspective of like, I should be very concerned about this for my job is fair, right? I don't ever want to tell anybody like, hey, don't have concerns about things, but no job has ever been safe in the long run. Your job in IT hasn't been safe since cloud came along, because somebody might have said, well, I can just spin up these things now that you used to do manually. But at the same time, the economics of your company, the economics of the industry, the economics of the world, the competitiveness of your industry have been as big of factors in that as well. And as well as just, how good were you at your job, right? Have all been as much a piece of, whether you would keep your job or progress in your job as anything else, right? But a couple of things that sort of come to mind, and again, I'm sort of making an argument for the importance of early AI adoption. And again, we're 2 or 3 years into this. It does feel like everybody's talking about it all the time, but we are, again, literally just 2.5 years into this sort of, the Chat GPT era of what goes on. And maybe we need to come up with an acronym so that we can talk about it in the same way we talk about like AD or BC or something. But a few things I've sort of seen and learned, right? AI is like every new technology that's out there. It has a steep and long learning curve. And I think to a certain extent, we may be sort of artificially fooling ourselves, because at the beginning of using AI, you put a prompt or a query into a Chat GPT or a Gemini or something like that, and amazing things seem to come out of it, right? Like, hey, write me a business plan, or hey, do some research on this, competitive market dynamic, or hey, give me, 25 ideas for whatever. and it comes back in minutes or seconds or whatever it might be. It might be an hour when it should have taken 2 weeks or something. And we have this belief of like, oh my gosh, that would have taken me forever, and that's a problem. But I think the reality is, as you learn about this and you begin to actually use it, the learning curve is steep. And what I mean by that is what you will quickly find, and I find this in talking to a lot of companies, I find this in talking to my peers and colleagues, is they are amazed at the steepness of how quickly something they can take off and begin with. And then there is sort of the normal period of, I'd like to refine this. I'd like to make sure it's accurate. I'd like to bring it up to a quality level that we get there. But it's very good at helping with some early stage stuff. And I think as long as you begin to sort of understand that concept of like, it can accelerate the beginning or the middle of a lot of things that you do all the time that quite honestly, you probably think of as sort of toil type of work. Or even if it's the core of what you do, like, and it can help accelerate making you better at doing that because you now have time to think and ponder and reason and refine and experiment and all those sort of things. But first and foremost, I think there is a long learning curve to it. There is a steep learning curve, and again, I think that there is a mental kind of twist that happens in which you think, because that first couple of experiences that you see with it feel really accelerated, that the whole thing is going to be accelerated. And I think the reality that I'm seeing is that it can do some things very, very well. And then there is a lot of like, okay, just like everything we do, like the first 90% could feel like it's very fast. It's the last 10% of getting it to that quality level that you expect it to get, right? A couple of other things I've seen from talking to a lot of different companies about this and talk to people how they do it. Right now, nobody knows what AI best practices look like. Nobody knows what good AI KPIs look like. Nobody understands what AI costs look like at this point. And I can caveat any of those things, but let's just take them in chunks, right? If you said, hey, what's the AI best practices for not just like prompt engineering, for example, right? Like if you said like, hey, how do I write a great prompt to get great marketing stuff? Okay, there are, what feels like a million newsletters that can help you kind of get better at it, understand the structure of it, understand, okay, if I'm doing it with this model, how do I begin to do it? How do I begin to do it another? But like, there really aren't best practices, for example, of, let's say you are a team of 10 marketing people. What's the best way to A, figure that out, B, share that with your team, C, do a bunch of experimentation to figure out, is one better than the other, right? Even like basic things like that, like, imagine you have a team of 10 people and you all have access to the same tools. What are the best practices even within your team, right? I think we still haven't begun to scratch the surface of what that looks like, let alone being really, really good and proficient at using the tools themselves. And, I said nobody knows what good AI KPIs at this point look like. I can't tell you how many companies I've talked to in which, we'll talk to one of the leaders who has, worked out, the budget for, deploying something to 5,000 people or 500 people or 50,000 people. And you go, okay, what drove that? And they go, well, we were sort of told we would get, 30 to 50% improvement in productivity, or, whatever the number was. And you go, okay, cool. Have you figured out how to measure that yet? And they're like, no, I haven't. And part of it is, I don't know that the tools are there yet. I don't know, they'll tell you, I don't know that I knew what the baseline was before we got started, right? And again, because they could see that very first or second interaction and being like, wow, this thing seems like it does amazing things. I think the reality is they're now beginning to kind of get into I didn't know what my baseline was before. I don't necessarily know how to measure where we are to better. I guess we could. And you're also, we're going to come to some realities of like, how are we measuring these things? And I think the reality is like, we don't really love to measure, human productivity. We love to measure things like I created more widgets out of the factory, or I took this many more phone calls, or I took, we did this many more in sales. But we just don't really have great KPIs around knowledge worker productivity, right? So there's still opportunities to be, far better than what you are, And then the matter becomes like, well, are you measuring it? Does it feel like it's better? Are you communicating it better? There's a ton of gray area in that space. And the third thing I said was that nobody understands AI costs at this point. And I'm sure, that's sort of I shouldn't say nobody. I oftentimes speak in absolutes when I shouldn't speak in absolutes. But, yes, if you went to, the folks over at OpenAI, they would probably tell you, yeah, I know what the next model building thing is going to cost. It's going to be some gigantic number with a B at the end of it. And, we probably don't have enough money to actually do that ourselves. We're going to have to raise money for it. Or Google could tell you what it could cost. Or, a Meta could tell you what the next, 500 billion size model would cost. But if you go to most people, and I'll point out like the latest cursor issue. If you took the regular developer, even if they're extra nerdy and they're digging into the stuff, they don't know how many tokens it takes to do every one of their queries. They don't know how many tokens it takes to come back and give you an answer for something. They just like the idea of like, well, I love this interface, I love interacting with it, and I like the output of it. And then suddenly, if like, for example, the pricing gets changed because, on the back end, the number of tokens and GPU cycles and so forth were killing the business for Cursor, and it changes to something, all of a sudden you're really frustrated, but you weren't coming back and being like, oh, no, 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 I understand the economics of your business. I fully understand. You didn't understand it to begin with in the first place. You were just kind of happy that it was free, or it got turned on, or you got a free tier, or you could switch models. And then now, once it actually comes into place, you're like, hold on a second. Now, how am I going to actually do my job? Because I didn't think about the economics of it while I was doing it. I was just trying to be better at what I did. Right. So, all of these things are still totally wide open. The best way to the best way to use it, the best way to measure it, the best way to, cost it, all the really basic things of technology. Like, we don't really have any clue what any of these things are. And the good news about that is that gives you the opportunity to go, good. If nobody really cares, then I can go experiment a lot. I can figure out how I can potentially use this technology to, whether you're trying to make yourself better or make your team better, the things that people are using to measure if it's better are still really, really basic and rudimentary. They're probably going to have lots of problems in them, but the better you can get at figuring out just how to make the technology useful for you, even if it's very expensive or whatever, you are in a better position than sort of waiting on the sidelines and going, well, I'll let somebody else figure it out. I'll let somebody else figure it out, or I don't want to adopt it. I'm going to, you're going to get measured against something. You're going to get measured against a colleague who uses the tool. You're going to get measured against, the request for your outputs is going to be up higher because somebody's going to assume that you can do more. The sort of sitting on the sidelines is probably not going to play in your favor, right? Now, let's talk about sort of some of the generational concerns about this, right? Like there's the concern from older generations, let's call it 35 and up, in terms of age, who are concerned, oh, it's going to take my jobs. And then there's the concern from the younger generations of like, hey, how am I even going to get a job if the AIs are just going to do the low end work that I would have gotten hired for in the first place? And I think those are fair. Those are fair arguments. They're fair arguments that have been made for lots of things, right? Like it's sort of the argument that we don't love hiring junior developers, or we don't love hiring junior staff anymore because we don't even like we've gone through this for the last decade. We don't like training them. We don't like spending the cycles on training them. We don't like spending the cycles on like not having productive people to begin with. We don't necessarily like retraining people. People don't like to be retrained. All those sorts of things have been going on well before AI. I think in the context of this, I think the older generation, again, I'm just going to say 35 and up as far as age, you can make that whatever. I think the thing that I've seen from an AI perspective is your ability to have domain expertise, to know about things, to be able to ask the system more, I don't want to say intelligent questions, but more knowledgeful questions, right? Like, I understand this domain. Okay, I got this response back. That thing didn't really seem to understand this nuance. Let me ask it in the context of this nuance, in the context of, this comparison between A and B or whatever. I think you have, any domain expertise that you have, any experience that you have should be, should play to your advantage in this, especially as you're doing it now. Will it be maybe a little harder to keep up with all the technology and all the change? Yeah, maybe, because it does become harder over time for anybody to keep up with it. but I think your experience in your domain should be helpful to you. Now, for the younger generation, and I talk all the way down to my kids who are still in their teens or early 20s and still in college and so forth. The younger generations historically have always figured out ways to do things differently than the previous generation, and whether it was because it was out of fashion, oh, that's not cool to do it that way, or whatever, or it was out of necessity, as humans tend to do. They have always figured out new ways to work, to be creative, right? Whether that was people figuring out how to be good at email or good at text or good at building websites or good at, doing social media or whatever. Like, all of us have grown up through those things for the last 20 plus years. I would fully expect this next generation to be, they're already using AI in schools right now. Right now, it's potentially problematic. Are they cheating? All that kind of stuff. But like, they're going to be native to the tools. They will have figured out how to do those things. Now, are they thinking about it in the context of how do I do it for business versus like, how do I cheat on an exam? That's to be determined. But, they are going to come with a set of skills that, again, the business is going to have to figure out, okay, do I invest in these people? What do I do in terms of, when people leave the business, all those sorts of things. So, I don't know that I feel like there is, huge differences between the dynamics that we had 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Yes. Are things moving faster? Yes, absolutely. Right. Last thing I'll say, as I think about this, and I'm kind of giving guidance, and again, I'll go back to the original thing. Nobody wants to be told what to do. So you can take all of this and go, Brian, whatever, that's your opinion. You're wrong. This is crypto 2.0. You're getting scammed. It's going to die and fail off. Okay, fine. Right. Like, I'll take that argument. But the last argument that I'll make is that every CEO, whether you believe it or not, every CEO, every board is asking their companies, what are you doing with AI? Because the prospect of your business becoming 20%, 30%, 40% more efficient, faster, able to create things that you couldn't do before, right? All those sort of metrics and sort of numbers, again, whether you understand the technology or don't understand the technology, from a business 101 perspective, sound really interesting. They're the exact same arguments that every piece of new technology has ever made to companies in the past. Oh, you should store all your information centrally. Oh, I should get a database. Oh, you should connect all your people because you will be able to, connect, communications, connect to new markets, be able to have people work where they want. Oh, okay, that was networking, right? Like, we've seen all these arguments before, and they are pushing on this really hard. I can't tell you how many companies I've talked to who made a, X $1 million investment, 7 figures, 8 figures, 9 figures, in this AI. And part of it is they want to be able to check the box. They want people to be, have that potential advantage in front of them. And you're going to see more and more pressure on CEOs, whether it's from their peers, whether it's from their board, whether it's from the public markets, whatever it might be, to begin to look at AI and pushing AI very hard on companies. And whether that means like they do the thing where they say, hey, we're not going to hire any more people until the AIs sort of catch up, or whether they, they're pushing AI onto their workforce and saying, hey, really, really want you to use this. They don't have complete control over all of their decisions, right? You'd like to think, okay, person's in charge of the company, they should have control of it. They have a boss too. Even though they're the boss of your company, they have a boss too, whether it's a board, whether it's investors, whether it's the public market, whether it is market sentiment of their company. They don't have complete control, and they're oftentimes going to make decisions that will appease their bosses as well, or the market concern. And so you are going to see more and more companies, more and more CEOs, more and more C-level and board and so forth, pushing on AI to figure out its potential, right? And they'll make mistakes, right? We've made mistakes with other technologies in the past. We've made tons of mistakes, across the industry, whether it's at the technology decision level or strategy level or whatever. So again, this sort of comes back to, you can sit on the sidelines, but there will be some sort of entity, some sort of push, some sort of person, some sort of group who will push on AI adoption. And, in my experience over the last, again, 30-ish years, the more you can kind of have not just a perspective on it, but an adoption of it, the better off you tend to be. right? So anyways, I'll wrap it up there. Just a perspective, as always on weekend perspectives, just a perspective. But it's been very, very interesting to watch over the last, even year and a half, as this has gotten into the enterprise. Just kind of what the different perspectives are from people, the different behaviors are from people, and that's sort of my 2 cents perspective is the importance of early AI adoption, whether it's you at the individual level or the teams that you work with or whatever, is going to prove to be very, very important. And again, you may eventually decide it's a terrible thing for what we do and we don't want to adopt it. That's fine, but you will be coming at it from an informed decision perspective, and that's typically the best thing that you can come to, because you're never going to have all the information you need. You're never going to have all the data that you need to be able to make decisions. You do the best you can with what you have. So, anyways, that'll wrap it up. Felt a little preachy. Don't want to tell you what to do, but sometimes when there are vacuums, sometimes it's helpful to at least have somebody sort of give you go in that direction. So that's my guidance, to go in that direction. Anyways, with that, I'll wrap it up. Thank you all for listening. Thanks for telling a friend. Thanks for helping us grow the show. And thank you all for continuing to send us feedback and so forth. So with that, I'll wrap it up. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.